I'm just really thrilled to get invited by Judy to talk to you guys because actually in other parts of California and in other states where I've heard about what people are doing in public health on this built environment issue, the people who it resonates for the most are people like in high school and junior high who are much more forward thinking and much more in touch with what's really happening on the street than supervisors and other people. I'm your county health officer. I'm not elected, but I'm appointed by the Board of Supervisors to be like the county's doctor. And so it's my job to try to understand the health of the community and what could be done to make the health of the community better. So a lot of things that environmentalists are interested in. I, as a physician, take a slightly different spin. It's more about the human health than the natural environment. But very often, we work side by side with people in environmental things. So Judy thought this would be a good match to talk about this stuff. I put this in the beginning. You all know what county you live in. There's 1,800 square miles. More than half of our county is actually public land, can never be built on. We have about 176,000 residents currently, and we're a fast-growing county. So about 1.5% to 2.5% growth every year, which is really, really fast. And our largest community is El Dorado Hills. Our county seat is here in Placerville, but our largest independent city is actually up at South Lake Tahoe. And this just kind of shows you the population growth since 1995 and then projected into the future. So we're right about here now. And you see that there are a few more births than deaths in our county every year, but most of the growth is because people are migrating in, new people are moving in. And I like this table also because it shows not just that our population is growing, but that the vehicles, the number of cars on the road is growing, and actually it's growing a lot faster. If you look back in 1997, there was just about exactly one car for every human being in our county. And now we're up to 1.26 vehicles per person. Now it's pointed out to me that you can't drive more than one car at a time. So a lot of these cars are parked, but it says something about our dependence on the automobile and how important the auto is. And that just shows you kind of the migration pattern there. And if you just look at the people who work outside the home in our county, and there's about 90,000 of them, this is how they say that they get to work. More than 3/4 of them in our county get to work by driving in a car alone. And almost nobody walks, takes a bus, or bikes. If you compare it to the city of Davis, I know it's much flatter, more compact, but it's not that far away, and people in Davis aren't all that different from us. You still see that people drive in the car alone a lot, but look at all the bus riders, walkers, and bicyclists there are compared to our county. One of the jobs I have is to sign off on the death certificates of people who die in our county and look at what the causes are and try to see if there's anything we can learn from that. And we have about 1,000 deaths a year. So looking at a 3-year period or about 3,000 deaths, this is the most recent data we have. Heart disease and cancer are by far the leading causes of death. And then you have a lung disease related to smoking here, strokes, accidents, dementias, influenza, liver disease, suicide, and diabetes. That's our top 10 list. And that's not that different from the rest of an American county like ours today. What we found was, though, that when you look at the underlying causes for these things, the big things that are really killing us are tobacco, diet and inactivity, and those are the two big ones, alcohol, and motor vehicles. If you look at the risk factors, the root causes of these causes of death, that's what accounts for most of the deaths, certainly most of the deaths occurring in people before a ripe old age. So most of medicine is most of my colleagues and other physicians try to ascertain the cause of disease and try to prevent that from happening in the individual. And there are a lot of factors in the individual, in their behavior, in their genetic makeup, that determine whether there's really going to be a disease. Say you're talking about a virus, like one that causes AIDS. Okay, we know that that causes a disease, but your risk depends a lot on factors related to you, the kind of life you lead, and the kind of genetic endowment that you have. But in public health, what we do is try to understand what those risk factors are, but understand that they come out of an environment. It's a social environment, a cultural environment that determines those behaviors and those risk factors very often, and a physical environment. And what we try to do in public health, our job, and it's true in every county health department in the state, is we try to work with society to create the environment that supports the best possible health for the population, and as a result, we hope to prevent disease. So one of the important ways to look at the environment is to look at this idea of the built environment, and we define that as all the human-made additions to the natural environment that you see all around you, that we live and interact in every day. So obviously it's buildings, it's roads, bridges, everything that goes with the road network. It's the pedestrian network. It's public places like parks and plazas, train stations, playgrounds. It's even utility lines, dams, canals, anything that humans have added to the environment. And we had a symposium that Judy mentioned just last month, where we had about 85 invited guests, most of them county and city government people, planners, traffic engineers, elected officials, developers, community advocates. And we feel that after spending a whole day talking about the kind of things I'm going to briefly introduce you to here, that there's a real growing momentum in our county to be looking at how we can make land use decisions that improve the health of the people who live in this environment. And what you look at the research, and I'll just summarize it for you, is that when people live in sprawling, very auto-dependent environments where to get anywhere you've got to get in a car or you're taking your life in your hands, that those people have more heart disease, more cancers, more diabetes, more injuries, more asthma, more bone disease, more impotence, more psychological problems than people who live in environments that are more walkable, more bikeable, where they have things more within their reach without having to depend on an auto. And the biggest problem that I want to take you into for a minute here that's related to the built environment is our obesity epidemic. And this is clearly, in this century now, the #1 public health problem in our county. And it's basically the result of a chronic energy imbalance. People are taking in more high-calorie foods than they are burning off through the expenditure of that energy in physical activity. And there are a lot of environmental factors, not just the presence of fast food restaurants and the presence of televisions and video games, but this built environment that have a big impact on this. Now, when we're talking about obesity, just so you know, when medical health people are talking about it, they use this body mass index, and it's just basically a computation based on your height and your weight. So for a given height, you just measure where you are in inches, and then your weight in pounds. You look it up on this chart, and if you're in this green zone here, that's considered a normal weight. These yellow zones, it's not so good, and way up here in the orange zone, it's really bad. And you're actually malnourished. There's hardly anybody in America down here anymore, except some fashion models, perhaps. But this area here is where we call overweight, and above there is obese. And it's just incredible when you look at the medical complications, as a doctor would, of obesity, the things that will chronically develop over the lifetime of a person. I'll just mention one, this diabetes, which is also experiencing an epidemic now in America. If you look at this body mass index, and you look here at the risk of your chance of developing this type 2 diabetes, which is what almost everyone has these days, where 1 is like the baseline risk. And then this tells you the multiples of 1 that occur in women and in men as their weight gets heavier. And as you see, when you're out there in that obese range at 31, 33, 35 body mass index, if you're a woman, your risk of diabetes is 40, 50, 90 times higher than if you didn't have that weight compared to people of more normal weight. And as a country, we are heavier than ever. Just starting back in here, the 1960s, 1970s, this is the prevalence of obesity, the extreme form, and overweight in red here. And you see in the 1980s, it started taking off, getting higher and higher. And I'm going to take you through some maps now. If you haven't seen this, it's really compelling stuff to see just how, as a nation, we have just exploded in terms of our weight. You guys haven't been around long enough to realize that people weren't always this fat. And it's really something unusual. So here we are in 1985. Not all states measured in those days obesity, but this is the prevalence, the percentage of the population that is over that 30 body mass index number. Still a lot of states not measuring it here, but you'll see over time the prevalence is just increasing. So here in 1991 now, you've got a new category, so you're up to 15 to 19% are in that overweight, or that obese category. And more states. And now another new category comes in 1997. And you see it just taking over the country. And now 2001, you'll see Mississippi, that's Mississippi down there, seems to be the first kind of trendsetter in all this. 2003, and 2004, and that's, more than a quarter of the people down there are morbidly obese in all those states. Fortunately, it isn't quite as bad here. But now we even have to add another category, more like a third now. And this is the last year I've got. For some reason, Colorado's held on, and Hawaii and a couple other states are not as bad, although to the rest of the world, they'd still look pretty heavy. So what about El Dorado County? Well, you can see that El Dorado County here is in red, and since 2001, we're kind of following that trend. We used to be a little skinnier than California as a whole, but we've advanced. One area that's of real concern to us in public health is childhood obesity. It's one thing if people kind of slow down and eat too much when they're middle-aged and elderly. They don't have their whole lives ahead of them, but young kids do. And it's really been rapidly increasing. Since the 70s, obesity in kids 2 to 5 years old has doubled. It's tripled in kids 6 to 11 and in teens. And it's already happening in most states that 1 child in 5 is obese now. And only a quarter of California kids across the board, we're a little better in our county, meet the state's fitness standards. This is really concerning to a doctor because you start to see in these kids diseases that once only adults had, like high blood pressure, diabetes. I mean, this is unbelievable. it used to be something you get when you're 50, 60 years old and weren't moving much, but now we're seeing it in 16, 17, 18-year-olds. Fatty liver disease, sleep apnea, which is more than snoring. It's where you can't even breathe right to sleep. And of course, a lot of psychological problems. And if it's occurring in kids, it doesn't usually go away as they get older and they don't outgrow it. And what this means is that your generation is actually the first one since the founding fathers and all those guys 200 years ago, where your life expectancy is less than your parents instead of being more. And it's all because of this. Just looking at El Dorado County, the most recent year, I'll put the most recent year up here. So 20% of our teens are obese. 57%, that's actually better than the state average. Don't meet all the fitness standards. 62% don't get 5 fruits and veggies a day. 28% of kids 2 to 18 will tell you they ate in a fast food restaurant in the last 24 hours. And a quarter of teens, even though they're supposedly in PE and everything, don't have vigorous physical activity at least 3 times a week. We're going to be talking about walking. Walking is really good for you. It's an ideal exercise for people who are just needing to start up if they're very sedentary now. You don't need any special equipment. You don't need to join a gym and pay any dues. You can usually work it into your daily routine if you just have a place you can walk safely. You might meet interesting people. And it's certainly the most readily available form of exercise for everyone. But as a country, we just don't walk anywhere. If you look at the United States, you look at these are percentage of trips from home by walking or bicycling. More than 90% of our trips are by motorized transportation. 6% are by walking. You can bet almost all of those are in Manhattan and San Francisco and places like that, not in our county. Compare that to Denmark or Holland. Why is this? Well, maybe it's because we've kind of turned over the built environment to transportation engineers whose job is to move cars around and not thinking so much about people anymore. And it cuts out the whole option of walking and biking. So a quarter of our trips today are less than a mile in length. And for most people who can walk, a mile is a reasonable expectation. But 75% of those trips under a mile are still taken in a car. Now you could say, well, people are lazy. But maybe it's because they don't actually even have the option of walking, because they just don't have the sidewalk. The streets are like this. It's just not safe in any other way to go. We've seen a drop in trips taken by foot in our country in just 20 years of 42%. Today, only 22% of California adults will walk for an average of 150 minutes a week or 30 minutes 5 days a week. I don't see how they do it, but 27% will tell you over the phone they don't walk at all. I guess they get carried out to the car or something. I don't know how that works. Believe it or not, when I was going to school, there was hardly anybody whose parents drove them and created a big traffic jam around the school and dropped the kids off and then waited and picked them up. Half the kids actually walked or biked to school. Most of the rest walked to get a bus and then took the bus from there. Today, less than 15% will walk or bike to school. Now, if they did, they'd have built-in physical activity, just that kind of walking we were talking about. It's just part of their routine. They'd find out it's fun. They'd have a lot more concern for the natural environment, spending more time outside, seeing flowers bloom or whatever. It actually reduces local crime, having all these kids on the street to kind of keep an eye on things. And it certainly cuts down on all the traffic congestion, pollution, and speeders who are trying to drive around schools and trying to get somewhere else when all those parents are there. If we only had a walkable environment, if we had sidewalks and crosswalks that made it possible for people to get out, walk out their front door and go for a walk, you'd find that they would do it. Where people live, where there's safe places to walk, 43% of adults, still not a lot, but will get the recommended amount of physical activity. But if they don't have a safe place to walk, it's only 27%. So I just want to show you some data that we did, a little study here in El Dorado County. If you're going to talk about giving people a place, making people walk, they need to have a place to go. So we said, well, one place everybody needs to go is to get food, healthy food preferably, but they've got to eat. So how many households in El Dorado County can walk from their homes to supermarkets, places where in our society today, you're going to find your healthy foods. We don't have a lot of produce markets or farmers markets in this county. So it's mostly the supermarkets where we have to get our fruits and vegetables and other good things. And how many households can walk from their homes to fast food outlets? We'll let them stand in for less than ideal food choices. So we use this software that uses this geographic information systems technology. And we assumed that people can walk along the existing roadways for up to a mile, that would be a reasonable distance. And we assumed that our county had a perfect sidewalk, crosswalk network, so that if there was a road going down to the supermarket, they could walk on a nice sidewalk to get there. And we use residential parcels from the assessor's office instead of actual houses. So it includes a few vacant lots where the houses aren't there yet. This is our county looking from space. And these are the 17 supermarket locations where they exist in our county. And Placerville is right here, and Cameron Park and El Dorado Hills are here. And if you look on a parcel map, there's about 75,000 different residential parcels in the county. This is, again, where the supermarket locations are, and that's Lake Tahoe way up there. So what we found out, of these 75,000 residential parcels, only 0.6% are within a quarter mile of any of those supermarkets. 3.4% are within half a mile. 14.1% are within a mile. So about 86% of the potential housing units in our county are more than a mile from any supermarket because of the way we've designed our communities. But you say, well, whoa, this is a rural county. We're not going to ask Raley's and Safeway to go build a big, beautiful supermarket for every little country village, right? So what we decided to do is to look at just those areas that are much more densely populated, where you'd say it's not really rural. This is an urban or suburban area. So someone has gone out with a GPS device and actually mapped, I don't know how many thousand of miles of roads and highways there are in our county, and have plotted them all on maps that you can download. And what we did was we looked for where there were road intersections of increasing density. And we found that the density of the road intersections kind of concentrated in certain areas. And we said, okay, we're going to draw a line around all the areas where there are more than 60 road intersections per square mile. And we're going to call that our urban areas. And we're just going to look at that and see what the supermarket access is like there. So here are the two on the western slope, Placerville and El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park. So there's actually about a third of our total parcels are in those areas. But you still can't walk. Even if you live in that environment, you still only have 0.6% of the parcels in those concentrated areas are within a quarter mile of a supermarket. 5.3% are within half a mile. 22.4% are within a mile. So still, only about, you still have more than 3/4 of people would have to get in their car just to go to a supermarket, even in those suburban areas. And if you just look here at Placerville, this is like an aerial photo. This shows you that the 1/4 mile, 1/2 mile, and 1 mile kind of pattern using the existing road network. And to see, who lives in these areas. And all these areas aren't covered, including kind of where most of the people in Placerville live. If it weren't for that old Albertsons up here, it would be even worse. But still, even in this Placerville area, only 1/4 are within a mile. And this just shows you on the parcel map, these are the supermarkets. And if you look closely, I mean, even this is an overestimate, because people aren't going to walk across the freeway interchange. Even if they lived here, they're probably going to get in a car just to go there. But this assumes that, yeah, you can actually walk that. So it's even worse. And just looking here in the Cameron Park area in particular, you notice they built the supermarkets over here where hardly anybody lives, almost directing you to have to see all these people here. About 15,000 people live here where there's no healthy food sources except accessible by car. Similar pattern for most of El Dorado Hills. So what about fast food? Well, we mapped some popular fast food chains in the county. And just looking in those dense zones again, we found that the access was actually a little better. If you don't have a car or something, you can't get to the supermarket, but you sure can get to McDonald's. Still not perfect, but here 14% are within 1/2 a mile. 42% now are within a mile. So if you're willing to walk a mile, you've got almost a 50-50 chance of running into a fast food restaurant. So you're about 2 to 3 times closer than for a supermarket. And you see that for Placerville here, a lot more of the map is blotted out now by the access patterns. And here they are. So if you know where you are, you can see there's a lot more of the communities. Still, a lot of people couldn't even walk to fast food. And it's not as good over here, but you do see whole new areas of Cameron Park start to open up that weren't served before. So I just wanted to focus on that northern end of Cameron Park. I don't know, do you guys live all over the county, or are you from mostly around here? All over? Okay. Anybody from this end of Cameron Park up by Green Valley Road? Okay, well, it's actually a really highly densely populated area and quite inaccessible to anything. They just opened a new Long's Drug and a Starbucks right in here. Just up where Bass Lake Road and Green Valley Road here. Okay, I just want you to focus on this little area right here, this census tract, and we'll blow this thing up. There are 497 households here. It really puts a lie to the notion that we're a rural county. In this small area in 2004, there were more than 1,500 people living there. That's a population of 7,267 people per square mile. That population density is double that of the city of Seattle. It's 3 times that, the city of Atlanta. In this little area, there are 360 school-aged children, 88 seniors, 675 adults work outside the home, and 88% of them drive alone to work because there's hardly any mass transit. And there's hardly any employment in the immediate area either. I just want to focus on one of those kids. Let's say they're a middle school student over here at Pleasant Grove Middle School. You guys all familiar with this school along Green Valley Road? They're opened in 2003. Beautiful campus. If you imagine a kid who lives in one of the apartments there at the corner of Bass Lake and Green Valley Road, they'd find that along Green Valley Road there's only a narrow shoulder, and the cars going along there are moving at about 55 miles an hour. And when they got to school, here it is, there's the school, they could go into the office and ask to look at the basic campus rules in the student parent handbook. Rule number 8, students walking to and from school are to use sidewalks. There are no sidewalks. This school's been here for 4 years. We've had a whole class go through the 3 years of this school and never even have the opportunity to walk to school, despite all those hundreds of kids who live within a walkable distance. So that's something for you to think about, and hopefully not ignore the doctor's advice. What young people have done in a lot of other counties when they're presented with these kind of data from their peers and their communities is to pick areas where they'd like to see the transportation engineers and the politicians put money and attention into creating more walkable environments. They've made videos, gone around and done like picture shows that show you exactly what it's like to try to walk to school along the busy highways and primitive dirt paths that they have to use because nobody has thought of investing in the proper infrastructure to make it safe for them to do that. And it's really compelling stuff. It makes things start to happen because nobody wants to see you guys putting your life in your hands, but they don't think about it. And they don't think about the cost to you and your health of driving you everywhere and not giving you a chance to walk or bike someplace you got to go anyway. So that's it.
That was awesome.
Thank you.